About 10 years ago, I graduated from university in the middle of a financial crisis. I just received my master's in financial economics, and I was ashamed because I didn't really understand what was happening. And at first I thought maybe it's me, maybe I didn't pay attention during the lectures, but it turned out many financial economists didn't know what was happening. And I realized that I was educated to function very well within this financial system, but not to really understand it, let alone question it. And I spent the last 10 years studying the financial system, and I think I understand it a little bit better today. And I realized it is not serving our society very well. It is unstable. And I'd like to show you this graph to make my point. Every peak on this graph is multiple countries in a financial crisis. So if we had a stable financial system, financial stability, this would be a flat line. You wouldn't see anything right now. However, people within the financial system pretend it is stable. And just to keep up that appearance of financial stability, we as a society have to sacrifice a lot. I want to show you what we are sacrificing and why I think that is not necessary, because we could simply redesign the monetary system. Because the monetary system, that is the basis of our financial system. It starts with money. A great concept. So you have a useless piece of paper or a number on a screen, and you can buy actual goods with it or services from somebody else. And as long as we all believe we can buy something with that money again, it works. It just keeps our economy running. It is like the oil in the engine of our economy. But we should not forget that to let the engine run, we need fuel. Money is not the fuel. What goes in is natural resources and labor. That is what produces stuff. That is the real economy. And a financial system should be supportive to this real economy. It should not extract from that economy. It should absorb shocks for the real economy and not cause shocks in the real economy. Now let's take a closer look at our monetary system. I'd like to ask you a question. Who is creating our money? Is that the government? Is it central banks, public institutions like the European Central Bank? Or is it commercial banks like ING and Rabobank? So who thinks it's the government? Raise your hand, please. Who thinks it's a central bank? Okay. And who thinks it's commercial banks? So most people here think it's a central bank, a public institution. And that's not a weird idea, because money serves this public function. However, most of the money in our economy is created by commercial banks. Only 5% is created by public institutions, the central bank, and that's the papers that we use, the banknotes and the coins in our pockets. The rest of our money is created by commercial banks whenever somebody goes to the bank to borrow money, either to buy a house, to start a business, whatever. The bank just types in some numbers in the screen, and out of thin air, new money is created. Now, that is a privilege that not even governments have. They can't do that. And if a government needs money, it needs to tax their citizens, or it has to borrow as well, just like regular people. And this privilege that banks have, although they can't make money just for themselves, is very powerful. Because they do allocate the money. They decide who gets the loan. And if you provide a loan to an oil company, we're going to drill for oil. If you provide and loan out money to a hedge fund manager, That money is going to go into the financial sector. He's going to speculate with that money. It's not going to go to productive investment in the real economy. So money is steering where we as a society put our efforts into. That's very powerful. The big question is, of course, can we rely on banks to allocate this money in a wise manner to serve the public good, the public interest? Well, the obvious answer is, of course, no, because banks are private institutions. They have shareholders, and their number one priority is making profit for their shareholders. So we can't really blame the banks. It's just the way the system works. And governments know that. That's why the financial sector is the most heavily regulated industry in the world. There's 10 Bibles of financial regulation, and there's so much written down. But still, it doesn't really work, because the bankers are smart. They find loopholes in these laws, and they always find a way to keep gambling with other people's money. And if they gamble right, they can keep the profits for their shareholders, for themselves. And if they lose, the government will step in, because money is so important for our economy, the oil in this engine. So we need it, so we can't let the banks go bankrupt. And this happened during this financial crisis in 2008. Taxpayers' money was used for that. But the most remarkable thing is not really that the taxpayers' money was used, but that nothing has changed afterwards. Little more regulation, just minor details, not a fundamental change. So banks are still too big to fail. And it's even worse than that, because they're also too big to jail. Nobody was held accountable. No bankers went to jail after the crisis. And this picture behind me, this is from a report of the US House of Representatives. They looked into a scandal of HSBC, because HSBC is the largest bank in the world, and they laundered money for Mexican drug cartels, facilitating brutal killings and other drug-related crimes in Mexico. But the Department of Justice in the US didn't prosecute the bank or the bankers. They settled with the bank. They just paid a fine. Why? Well, from this investigation, we know why. Because the British finance minister and the governor of the Bank of England sent a letter to their American counterparts saying, please do not prosecute HSBC, because this is a very large financial institution, and they may go bankrupt, and that could endanger our financial stability. This is not an incident. It happens all the time. ING recently settled with the Dutch government also for money laundering. The great sponsor of this event, Rabobank, also settled with the governments for the LIBOR fraud. And it's happening all around. So this is a pattern. The banks are above the law. And this is really, really bad, because then laundering money for Mexican drug lords becomes a business decision. Because if you know you won't go to jail, it's just how much can the fine be if we get caught, and how much are the potential profits? A business decision. So we sacrifice our rule of law for this illusion of financial stability. Because it's an illusion. Because in reality, we are stuck in this cycle of boom, bust, boom. And the current financial system does not absorb shocks in this cycle. It actually amplifies this cycle. Because in the period of boom, a lot of extra money is loaned out and created, and that circulates mostly within the financial sector, leading to rising asset prices. House prices are really sky high again right now. We're in such a boom period, and stock prices are sky high. But at some point, this bubble will burst. And at that moment when the bubble bursts, it is regular working class people, the middle class and the working poor, who will bear the costs because they will lose their jobs. And that is why most of us want change, and we need change. And not just a little more regulation, we need a fundamental change. We need a separation of the private and the public functions of money. So we need a separation within the banks, so banks can be private institutions again. Because if they become private institutions again, that can fail, that don't have to be bailed out, then this moral hazard disappears, because they know if they take excessive risks, they will have to bear the costs. And they know if they launder money for drug cartels, that they will go to jail. So they will think twice about doing that. However, we can't let the banks fail right now because they fulfill this public function. We rely on them for our money supply. We rely on them for the oil that greases the engine of our economy. So in order to allow banks to fail, we will have to do something. And there's many things that we can do to depend less on bank money for our economy. And the obvious thing here is that we should rely more on public money. Now, this banknote, this is the public money that we have right now. It's issued by a central bank. It's got the government behind it. And it's always been very important within our economy, because that's the funny thing. In the past, cash was more important, but slowly bank money became more important. And there's a very obvious reason for that, because our economy has digitalized. We now live in a digital society. I buy stuff online and I want to pay for stuff online, and I can't use this paper note for that. It's very simple. So what we need is central banks to update their paper money to the digital age. Because that's what banks did. That's why we use bank money. Banks have digitalized their money. So now the next step for us to become less dependent on bank money is for central banks to bring out this digital euro. Now, if that happens, we have this public euro in a digital form, which fits our digital economy. And we can rely on that as being the oil in this engine. And then, on the other hand, we can deregulate the financial sector. We can let banks fail. If they gamble, they go bankrupt. And we create this fair marketplace where you have competition between banks, new financial service providers, cryptocurrencies, and that we can leave that place to the free. We can leave that place free from all this heavy regulation. That's where the competition can start. That's where we can innovate, and that can only happen if we have this safe alternative provided for. Now, of course, we have to think about how to implement this, and there's many other solutions, and we should work out the details. But luckily, this is already happening. A lot of good books have been written about this topic, and I write about this on Follow the Money also. And there's also a political debate going on, because what we need is political action. Because it's not about new technologies. We already have the technology. Public digital money can be issued by the central bank. It's just a matter of political will. And here in the Netherlands, we had Stichting Ons Geld and Stichting Full Reserve, who already put this on the political agenda a few years ago. And the Scientific Council for Government Policy, WRR in Dutch, they have conducted a 3-year research into the monetary system. And they also concluded that we should separate private from public functions within banks, and that we should create a digital public alternative to bank money. Now, there is a debate next month in our parliament about this topic. And all of you can do something as well, because this should be at least in my opinion, on the top of the agenda of every political party. Because this is not something about left wing or right wing. This is just something we need to do if we value, on the one hand, the free market, on the other hand, the rule of law, on the other hand, the public good, and if we want to keep democratic influence on our financial system, and not the other way around, financial influence on our democratic society. Our money is just too important for our society to leave it all up to the banks. Thank you.